My name is Ivan Caldwell, 68 years old, and I built the house my daughter Jessica and son-in-law Andrew just threw me out of. After my wife died, I raised Jessica there alone, teaching her everything about honesty and family. When they moved in last year, they said it was to take care of me in my golden years. Instead, they forced me onto the street, claiming I was incompetent. The cruel irony? It happened the exact same day I secretly collected my $14.8 million lottery check. If you want to know what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories. I was born in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio, but moved to Pittsburgh when I was 22, fresh out of trade school and ready to make my mark as a construction worker. The pay was decent, the work was honest, and I took pride in building things that would last longer than me. It was on a job site in downtown Pittsburgh that I first saw Margaret, who was working as a secretary for the development company. She had these bright blue eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a laugh that could light up a room. After 3 months of me finding excuses to visit the office, she finally agreed to have dinner with me. We married 11 months later in a simple ceremony at her parents' church. We were young, in love, and believed we had our whole lives ahead of us. For 35 years that was true. Margaret was my rock, my compass, my everything. We saved every penny for 5 years to buy that modest plot of land in the suburbs, and I spent 2 years building our house myself on evenings and weekends. Every nail, every board in that place had my sweat in it. It was supposed to be where we would grow old together. Jessica came along when we were both 30, our miracle baby after years of trying. Margaret was the most devoted mother you could imagine, and I worked double shifts to make sure they had everything they needed. Jessica was always a bright kid, curious about everything, and Margaret encouraged that spark in her. They were inseparable. When Jessica was 17, Margaret started having headaches. We thought it was just stress. Maybe her eyes needed checking. By the time we got a proper diagnosis, the brain tumor was already inoperable. She was gone 3 months later. Just like that, my world collapsed. Jessica was starting her senior year of high school, and suddenly it was just the two of us, both shattered by grief. Those first years after Margaret died were brutal. Jessica threw herself into her studies, maybe as a way to process her pain, while I worked myself to exhaustion so I could fall asleep at night without crying. I made sure Jessica could go to any college she wanted. When she got accepted to Carnegie Mellon with a partial scholarship, I was so proud I nearly burst. I took on extra jobs to cover the remaining tuition. No sacrifice seemed too great for my little girl, the only family I had left. Jessica flourished in college, making the dean's list every semester. She majored in business administration, and that was where she met Andrew during her junior year. He was studying finance, came from money, and had this confident way about him that seemed to dazzle Jessica. The first time she brought him home during spring break, something about him set off alarm bells for me. He was too polished, too perfect, like a salesman who knew exactly what to say to close a deal. But Jessica was smitten, and who was I to stand in the way of her happiness? When they announced their engagement right after graduation, I tried to be supportive despite my reservations. They wanted a big wedding, much fancier than anything Margaret and I would have considered. I had been saving for Jessica's future for years, and although it nearly wiped out my retirement fund, I paid for most of it. The look on Jessica's face as she walked down the aisle in her mother's altered wedding dress made it all worthwhile. I truly believed she had found happiness. After the wedding, Jessica and Andrew moved to Philadelphia for his job at an investment firm. They seemed to be doing well financially, at least from the outside. The visits became less frequent, just holidays, and the occasional weekend. When I hit 65, I finally retired. My body was feeling the effects of decades of physical labor. Nothing serious, just the usual suspects. Arthritis in my hands, high blood pressure, some hearing loss in my right ear from years of construction noise. About 3 years ago, Andrew lost his job. Jessica called with the news, explaining they were downsizing their apartment and looking for options. Then came the suggestion that caught me off guard. They wanted to move in with me, supposedly to help care for me as I aged. I was managing fine on my own, but the idea of having Jessica back home had its appeal. I missed her, and part of me hoped to rebuild the closeness we had before Andrew came into the picture. My instincts told me to be cautious, but I ignored them. The house had 4 bedrooms, plenty of space for all of us. And wasn't this what family was supposed to do, look out for each other? So I agreed, despite a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right about the timing or the sudden concern for my well-being. The changes started small after they moved in. Andrew took over my garage workshop, saying I shouldn't be using power tools anymore because of my arthritis. Jessica began rearranging furniture, putting family photos in drawers instead of on display, changing the house I had built into something unrecognizable. They started referring to my occasional forgetfulness as something concerning, even though it was normal stuff anyone my age might experience, like misplacing reading glasses or forgetting the neighbor's kid's name. Soon they were managing my medication, insisting on driving me to doctor appointments, questioning every purchase I made. When my old friend Bill would stop by for our weekly chess game, Jessica would hover around, interrupting our conversations. Eventually, Bill stopped coming. The same happened with other friends and neighbors. Within 6 months, my social circle had shrunk to almost nothing. I didn't recognize what was happening at first. They were so careful, so gradual in their approach. Each small change was presented as concern for my welfare, and I wanted to believe my daughter had my best interests at heart. But looking back, the signs were all there. They were systematically isolating me, controlling my life, and preparing for something I couldn't yet see. For 30 years, I played the same lottery numbers every week without fail. 6 numbers that meant something special to Margaret and me. The day we met, our wedding date, Jessica's birthday. It was a promise I made to Margaret before she died. She used to joke that when we won, we'd travel the world together. After she passed, I kept playing those numbers as a way to honor her memory, a small weekly ritual that kept her close. Every Sunday morning, I would check the numbers alone in the kitchen before Jessica and Andrew woke up. It was my quiet time, a cup of coffee and the newspaper, Margaret smiling down at me from the small photo I kept hidden in my wallet. For 1,560 weeks, the ritual ended the same way. A sigh, a smile at Margaret's photo, and a whispered, "Maybe next week, honey." But that Sunday 3 months ago was different. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw the numbers. All 6 matched. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. I checked 3 times, comparing each number carefully. There was no mistake. After 30 years of playing the same numbers, I had won. The jackpot was $32 million. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the ticket. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I looked at Margaret's photo. I found myself talking to her as if she were sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "Can you believe it, Maggie? We did it. We finally did it." I laughed and cried at the same time, overwhelmed by emotion. My first instinct was to wake Jessica and share the incredible news. Despite everything, she was still my daughter, still the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders. I wanted to tell her we could pay off her student loans, maybe buy them a house of their own. In that moment of joy, I temporarily forgot the growing distance between us. I was heading toward their bedroom when I heard their voices. They were already awake, speaking in hushed tones they clearly didn't want me to hear. I paused in the hallway, not intentionally eavesdropping, but something in Andrew's tone made me stop. "We need to move faster on getting power of attorney," he was saying. "The market is hot right now. If we wait too long to sell, we might miss the window." Jessica's voice came next, impatient and unfamiliar. "I'm working on it, but we need that doctor to sign off first. Dad is getting suspicious. He asked about the bank statement yesterday." "I can't keep pretending to be nice to the old man much longer," Andrew replied. "Just make it happen. Once we sell this place, we can finally get out of this dump and back to civilization." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The lottery ticket in my pocket suddenly felt heavy. I crept back to the kitchen, my mind racing. They were planning to take control of my finances, sell my house from under me. The past months of subtle control and isolation suddenly made perfect sense. It was all leading to this. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not tell them about the lottery win, not until I understood exactly what they were planning. I needed time to think, to protect myself. I slipped the winning ticket into an envelope and hid it inside a hollowed-out book on woodworking that Andrew would never touch. The next morning, I told them I was going to my regular physical therapy appointment. Instead, I took the bus downtown to the State Lottery Commission office. I had researched the process online using the public library computer, careful not to leave any traces at home. The claim process was straightforward but thorough. They verified my ticket, confirmed my identity, and explained my options. Take the full amount over 30 years, or a lump sum of $14.8 million after taxes. Given what I had overheard, the choice was clear. I needed access to the money now. I chose the lump sum and set up a new bank account at a different bank from the one Jessica and Andrew had been monitoring. The lottery officials explained that my win would become public record in 2 weeks, as required by state law. I had that long to prepare. The check they handed me seemed surreal, a piece of paper worth more money than I had earned in my entire life. I stared at it, thinking about all the possibilities it represented. Not just financial security, but freedom. Freedom from depending on a daughter who had apparently decided I was a burden rather than a father. The Uber ride home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Despite everything I had overheard, part of me still hoped there was an explanation, still wanted to share this windfall with Jessica. She was my only child, my flesh and blood. Surely the money could fix whatever had gone wrong between us. Maybe they wouldn't need to sell the house if they knew we were now financially secure. But another part of me, the part that had survived decades of hard labor and the crushing loss of my wife, knew better. Money doesn't change who people are. It only reveals them more clearly. And what Jessica and Andrew had revealed in those unguarded moments spoke volumes about who they had become. I tucked the check inside my jacket pocket as the car pulled up to my house. It was just past 3 in the afternoon, and I noticed several cars in the driveway, including one I didn't recognize. Something was happening, and whatever it was, I knew instinctively it wasn't good. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual since Andrew was paranoid about security. I stepped inside to find 4 people sitting in my living room: Jessica, Andrew, a man in an expensive suit I didn't recognize, and an older gentleman with a stethoscope around his neck. They all turned to look at me with expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. "Where have you been, Dad?" Jessica asked, her voice full of artificial concern. "We were worried. You said you were just going to physical therapy." The lottery check felt like it was burning a hole in my jacket pocket. For a split second, I considered telling them everything, showing them the check, believing it might change what was about to happen. Instead, I simply said, "The session ran long. What's going on here? Who are these people?" Andrew stepped forward, putting on what I now recognized as his fake smile. "Ivan, this is Dr. Patterson, Hess, a geriatric specialist who's been evaluating your condition, and this is Mr. by comps, Grayson, our attorney. We've been discussing some important matters regarding your care." "My care?" I looked at the doctor. "I've never met you before in my life." The doctor cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, not directly, but I've reviewed your medical records and discussed your case extensively with your daughter and son-in-law. They have significant concerns about your memory and decision-making capacity." I felt a cold understanding settle over me. So this was their play. They were going to have me declared incompetent. The hushed conversation I had overheard suddenly made perfect sense. Jessica approached me with a folder of documents. "Daddy, we need to talk about some changes. Dr. Patterson agrees that living alone isn't safe for you anymore. Remember when you left the stove on last month? I had never done any such thing, and Jessica knew it. And you've been getting so confused about your medications. She was lying, straight to my face, creating a narrative of incompetence that had no basis in reality. I looked into her eyes, searching for any trace of the daughter I had raised, but saw only calculation. "We've found a really nice assisted living facility," she continued, "just 20 minutes from here. They have activities, medical staff, everything you need." "And what happens to my house?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Andrew jumped in. "Well, obviously it makes financial sense to sell it. The proceeds would pay for your care. Jessica and I would handle everything. We've already prepared the power of attorney documents." He gestured to the papers in Jessica's hand. I looked at them all, these strangers in my living room plotting to take everything from me. The lawyer who was supposed to uphold justice, but was instead facilitating this betrayal. The doctor willing to diagnose someone had never examined. My son-in-law, whose greed was at least honest in its nakedness. And my daughter, the most painful betrayal of all. "I need to read those documents," I said, reaching for the folder. Jessica hesitated, then handed it over with visible reluctance. "There are several forms, but basically they give us authority to make decisions on your behalf. Medical, financial, everything. It's for your own protection, Dad." I flipped through the pages, stunned by the comprehensive nature of what they were asking me to sign. I would be surrendering every right I had. Every decision, every penny I had worked for over a lifetime, would be theirs to control. "Why is there a suitcase by the stairs?" I asked, noticing it for the first time. Andrew and Jessica exchanged glances. "We thought it would be easier to make the transition today," Andrew said. "The facility is expecting you this afternoon. We've already packed your essentials." My blood ran cold. They had planned everything. This wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. "You've been planning this for months, haven't you?" Jessica at least had the decency to look momentarily ashamed before her expression hardened. "Yes, if you want the truth, we've known this day was coming. You're not well, Dad, whether you see it or not." I sat down heavily on the couch, the folder still in my hands. "I need time to think about this. To talk to my own doctor, maybe get a second opinion." The lawyer spoke for the first time. "Mr. Caldwell, your daughter has expressed concern that you might be resistant to accepting the help you need. If you refuse to sign voluntarily, they can petition the court for guardianship. Given Dr. Patterson's assessment, that petition would likely be granted." It was a threat, plain and simple. Sign, or we'll force you anyway. I looked at Jessica, searching her face for any sign of the daughter I had raised. "Jessie, why are you doing this? After everything we've been through together?" For a moment, her mask slipped. "Look, Dad, I don't have to pretend anymore. Taking care of you is exhausting. I have my own life to live. And frankly, this house is the only asset you have that's worth anything." She glanced at Andrew, who nodded encouragingly. "We've put our lives on hold for you, and we have nothing to show for it." "Nothing to show for it?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "I paid for your college, your wedding. I welcomed you into my home when Andrew lost his job. I've never asked for anything in return except basic respect." Andrew stepped closer, using his height to intimidate me. "Respect has to be earned, old man, and your constant suspicion and stubbornness haven't exactly made you easy to live with." I realized then that they had been gaslighting me for months, creating a narrative of a difficult, paranoid old man to justify what they were about to do. And I had nearly fallen for it, doubting my own mind, wondering if perhaps I was becoming a burden. "I'm not signing these," I said firmly, placing the folder on the coffee table. "And I'm not going to any facility. This is my house, and I want all of you to leave right now." Andrew laughed, an ugly sound devoid of humor. "That's not how this works." He turned to Jessica. "I told you, he'd be difficult. Plan B." Jessica nodded and pulled out her phone. "Dad, if you don't cooperate, well, call the police and tell them you're having an episode. With Dr. Patterson's statement, they'll take you for a psychiatric hold. Is that really how you want this to go?" It was in that moment that I truly understood I had lost my daughter. Whatever influence Andrew had over her, whatever greed or selfishness had taken root in her heart, the Jessica I had raised was gone. "I'm not signing anything," I repeated, standing up to face them. "This is elder abuse, and you know it." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, but didn't contradict me. Jessica stepped forward, her face now openly hostile. "Fine. Have it your way. But you're still leaving this house today, one way or another." "This is my house," I said. "I built it with my own hands. Your mother and I paid off the mortgage 20 years ago. You have no right to force me out." Andrew moved closer, using his 6'2" frame to tower over me. "Actually, we do." He pulled out another document. "You see, we've already taken steps. Last month, when you signed those insurance papers, you also signed a quitclaim deed transferring the house to Jessica, completely legal." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. That was fraud. I never signed any such thing. "Prove it," Andrew smirked. "Your signature is on the document, witnessed and notarized." Jessica at least had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Dad, this is happening whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you go to the facility we've chosen or we have you committed for psychiatric evaluation. Your choice." I looked from face to face, searching for any ally, any shred of compassion. The doctor studied his shoes. The lawyer examined his manicure. My daughter and her husband stared at me with cold determination. "Let me at least pack my own things," I said finally. "I have personal items, photos of your mother, my tools." Andrew's face twisted into a sneer. "Your tools? You think we're letting you take those? Do you know what a complete woodworking shop is worth? The tools stay. As for the rest, Jessica already packed what you need." Jessica nodded toward the small suitcase by the stairs. "Clothes, toiletries, a few books. That's all you need where you're going." My mind raced, thinking of the small keepsakes of Margaret hidden throughout the house, the album of family photos in the hall closet, the woodworking projects I had been saving to give Jessica for her birthday. All of it, about to be lost. "Can I at least have a few minutes to say goodbye to the house?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. 30 years of memories here. Surely you can give me that much." Jessica hesitated, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes. Then we're leaving for Pine Grove Care Center." I walked slowly through the house, touching the walls I had built, the banister I had carved by hand. In each room I silently said goodbye, not just to the space but to the memories it held. Margaret and I dancing in the kitchen, Jessica taking her first steps in the living room, family Christmases around the dining table. In my bedroom, I quickly grabbed Margaret's wedding ring from my nightstand drawer and slipped it into my pocket alongside the lottery check. It was the one thing I couldn't bear to leave behind. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the dresser. I reached for it, but Andrew's voice came from the doorway. "Time's up. Leave the picture. It's time to go." I walked back downstairs, the weight of 68 years suddenly heavy on my shoulders. Jessica held the front door open, not meeting my eyes. Andrew stood with my suitcase, impatience radiating from every pore. "I'm not going to any care facility," I said as I reached the door. "I'll find my own place to stay." Jessica started to object, but Andrew cut her off. "Fine, one less expense for us. But don't come back here. The locks will be changed within the hour." As I stepped onto the porch of my own home for what I believed was the last time, Andrew thrust the small suitcase at me. It was shockingly light, containing almost nothing of real value from my life. On the sidewalk, I turned back for one last look. Andrew was already closing the door. Through the window, I saw Jessica watching. For a moment, our eyes met. I searched for any sign of remorse, any flicker of the daughter I had raised. She held my gaze for a second, then deliberately turned away and closed the blinds. My neighbor Frank was watering his lawn across the street. He stared in open shock at the scene unfolding. "Ivan, what's going on?" he called. I couldn't bring myself to explain, the humiliation too fresh and raw. "Just a family disagreement, Frank," I managed to say. He'll be away for a while. As I walked away from the home I had built, I felt the weight of the lottery check in my pocket. They thought they had taken everything from me. They had no idea that I now had the resources to fight back. I made it as far as the park 2 blocks away before my legs gave out. I sank onto a bench, the pathetic suitcase at my feet, and let the reality of what had just happened wash over me. My only child had betrayed me, stolen my home, and thrown me out like garbage. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. An elderly woman walking her dog glanced at me with concern. "Are you all right, sir?" I wasn't all right. I might never be all right again. But as my hand brushed against the envelope in my pocket, I felt something harden inside me. Determination, resolve. They had taken my home and broken my heart, but they hadn't broken me. "Yes," I told her. "I'm fine, just resting before I move on." I spent that first night in a budget inn on the outskirts of town. The room was clean but soulless, with bland artwork and a mattress that had seen better days. I sat on the edge of the bed, my meager possessions unpacked in 5 minutes flat, and pulled out the lottery check, $14.8 million. The irony was almost too much to bear. For decades, I had played those numbers dreaming of the security it would bring, and now that I had won, I had never felt less secure in my life. I ordered a pizza but could barely eat. Sleep was out of the question. I spent the night alternating between crushing grief and simmering anger. How had my daughter become this person? What had I done wrong in raising her? Was it Andrew's influence? Or had the capacity for such betrayal always been there, waiting for the right circumstances? Morning brought no answers, but it did bring clarity. I needed to act, and quickly. I had resources now, but I needed to protect them before Jessica and Andrew somehow found out about my windfall. I showered, put on one of the 3 shirts Jessica had deemed sufficient for my new life, and headed to the largest bank in the city, one I had never used before. The bank manager, a woman named Linda Taylor, raised her eyebrows when I explained I needed to open an account and deposit a rather large check. When I slid the lottery commission check across her desk, her professional composure cracked momentarily. "Mr. Caldwell, this island." "Substantial," she said, studying my face with new interest. "Let me personally help you with this. We should discuss several account options and security measures." For the next 2 hours, Linda guided me through setting up various accounts, explaining tax implications, and introducing me to the bank's wealth management team. I gave them a brief version of my situation, explaining that I had recently become estranged from my daughter and son-in-law and needed to ensure they couldn't access these funds. "Mr. Caldwell, given what you've told me about your concerns, I would strongly recommend you consult with an elder law attorney," Linda advised. "I can refer you to several excellent ones who specialize in protecting seniors' assets and rights." "That would be helpful," I admitted. "I need to understand my options regarding my house as well." Linda made a call, and by that afternoon, I had an appointment with Sophia Washington, a well-respected attorney specializing in elder law and estate planning. Her office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, warm and inviting rather than intimidating. Sophia was in her 50s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. I found myself telling her everything: Jessica and Andrew moving in, the gradual isolation, the document I allegedly signed, and finally, the confrontation and eviction. As I spoke, Sophia took careful notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Her expression grew increasingly serious. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked me straight in the eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, what your daughter and son-in-law have done constitutes elder abuse and fraud. The good news is, we can fight this. The quitclaim deed they claim you signed, if you didn't knowingly sign it, that's fraud. We can challenge it in court." For the first time since being thrown out of my home, I felt a flicker of hope. "What do I need to do?" I asked. Sophia outlined a strategic approach. First, we needed to document everything that had happened, collecting evidence of the fraudulent transfer and the forced eviction. She suggested hiring a private investigator to gather additional evidence about Jessica and Andrew's activities. We would need medical evaluations to prove my mental competence, contradicting their claims. And we needed to move quickly, before they could sell the house or dispose of my belongings. "I have resources now," I told her, explaining about the lottery win. "That changes things. We can take our time, build a solid case." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "The money certainly helps, but time isn't entirely on our side. They're likely moving fast to sell your house, especially if they're worried you might challenge them. I suggest we file for an emergency injunction to prevent them from selling the property while our case proceeds." Over the next few days, I settled into a routine. Mornings were spent with Sophia, building our case. Afternoons, I searched for a more permanent place to live. I found a comfortable extended stay hotel that would do for the short term, but I knew I needed a real home. The private investigator Sophia hired, a retired police detective named Ray Morales, reported back with troubling news. Jessica and Andrew had already contacted a real estate agent and were preparing to list the house. They had also been removing items from the property: furniture, electronics, tools, and selling them online. My workshop, which represented decades of collected tools and unfinished projects, was being systematically dismantled and sold off piece by piece. Ray also discovered they had been accessing my bank accounts for over a year, making small but regular withdrawals that added up to nearly $50,000. They had canceled my credit cards and redirected my mail, including Social Security checks. It was a comprehensive campaign to strip me of resources and independence. Each new revelation was a fresh wound, but also strengthened my resolve. The daughter I had raised was truly gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Whatever sentimentality I still felt was overshadowed by the need to protect myself and seek justice. 2 weeks after my eviction, I found the perfect new home, a ranch-style house with a large workshop in the backyard, in a quiet neighborhood across town. The irony wasn't lost on me that it was nicer than the home I had built and lost. I purchased it outright, taking satisfaction in not needing a mortgage. The closing was expedited, and within a week, I had the keys. Moving in was a bittersweet experience. The house was lovely, but empty. I had no furniture, no mementos, none of the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. Starting over at 68 wasn't what I had ever imagined for myself. But as I walked through the empty rooms, I began to see possibilities. This could become a home, my home, without the shadow of betrayal that now hung over the house I had built. I spent the next week furnishing the place, taking unexpected pleasure in selecting items that suited my tastes alone. No compromises, no considering others' preferences. Just what I wanted, what would make me comfortable. It was a small freedom, but one I hadn't experienced in decades. The workshop was my particular joy. I invested in new tools, some even better than what I had lost. Working with my hands had always been my therapy, and as I set up my new space, I felt something inside me beginning to heal. Not the betrayal that still cut deep, but a sense that I could create a new life from these broken pieces. Sophia's legal strategy was progressing well. We had gathered substantial evidence of fraud and financial exploitation. Medical evaluations confirmed what I already knew. I was completely competent, with no cognitive impairment beyond the normal mild forgetfulness of aging. The doctor Jessica and Andrew had brought to the house admitted under questioning that he had never actually examined me, but had signed off on their assessment based solely on their reports. With each piece of evidence, each small victory, I felt my strength returning. The betrayal still hurt, a pain that woke me in the night and caught me unawares during quiet moments. But it no longer defined me. I was more than someone who had been betrayed. I was a fighter, a survivor, and now I had the resources to seek justice. What had begun as the worst day of my life was transforming into something unexpected, a reclaiming of myself, a discovery of strength I hadn't known I possessed. They had taken my house, but in doing so they had freed me from illusions about who they were. The truth was painful, but it was still the truth. And I had always been someone who preferred hard truths to comfortable lies. Over the next several weeks, I worked closely with Sophia and her legal team, building a comprehensive case against Jessica and Andrew. Ray, the private investigator, continued gathering evidence, documenting their every move. What emerged was a pattern of exploitation that shocked even Sophia, who had seen many cases of elder abuse in her career. The evidence was damning. Bank records showed systematic withdrawal from my accounts over 14 months, totaling nearly $57,000. My signature had been forged on at least 6 different documents, including the quitclaim deed to the house. They had canceled my health insurance without my knowledge and pocketed the premiums I thought were being paid. They had even tried to access my retirement accounts, though thankfully those required in-person verification that they couldn't manage. Perhaps most disturbing was what Ray discovered about Dr. Patterson, the physician who had supposedly evaluated me. He was actually a former colleague of Andrew's from his investment firm days, with a medical license but no active practice. He had been paid $5,000 to provide the false evaluation. When confronted with potential charges of fraud and misconduct, he quickly agreed to provide a sworn statement, admitting he had never examined me and had signed the evaluation as a favor to Andrew. Meanwhile, Jessica and Andrew had already listed the house for sale, asking well above market value. They had emptied it of everything valuable, including family heirlooms and photo albums that could never be replaced. According to neighbors Ray interviewed, they were openly discussing buying a luxury condo in Philadelphia with the proceeds from the sale. Frank, my neighbor across the street, provided a powerful written statement about witnessing my eviction. He had known me for 20 years and expressed outrage at how I had been treated. His wife, Gloria, added her own statement, detailing how Jessica and Andrew had gradually isolated me, discouraging neighbors from visiting and spreading rumors about my supposed mental decline. Another unexpected ally emerged in the form of Sarah Jenkins, Jessica's childhood best friend. Sarah had tried to visit me several times after Jessica and Andrew moved in, but had always been told I was too tired or confused to have visitors. Concerned, she had kept trying to maintain contact. When she learned what had happened, she was horrified and immediately offered to testify about the person Jessica had once been versus who she had become. Even my banker at my former bank, a young man named Michael Torres, provided evidence. He had noted unusual withdrawal patterns and had questioned Jessica about them. She had produced a power of attorney document that, we now knew, was forged. Michael had made notes about his concerns, but had been legally obligated to honor the document as presented. Now, he was eager to set the record straight. One by one, the pieces fell into place. Sophia filed for an emergency injunction to prevent the sale of the house, which was granted based on the substantial evidence of fraud. Jessica and Andrew were legally prohibited from selling the property or removing any more items from it until the case was resolved. While the legal battle unfolded, I focused on rebuilding my life in my new home. I joined a local woodworking club, finding camaraderie among fellow craftsmen who appreciated skill and experience. I volunteered at a community center teaching basic carpentry to teenagers, finding unexpected fulfillment in passing on my knowledge. And I began the process of replacing what could be replaced: furniture, tools, clothing. But some things could never be replaced. The box of Jessica's baby teeth Margaret had saved, the handprints in plaster Jessica had made in kindergarten, the photo albums chronicling our family history, the wooden music box I had carved for Margaret on our 10th anniversary, which played her favorite song. These losses cut deeper than the house itself. Sophia warned me that legal proceedings would be draining, both emotionally and mentally. She was right. Each filing, each response from Jessica and Andrew's lawyer was like reopening a wound. They denied everything, painted me as a confused old man making wild accusations out of senility and spite. They claimed everything had been done with my full knowledge and consent, that I had agreed to sell the house and move to assisted living, then changed my mind and concocted this elaborate story. The most difficult day came when we had to give depositions. Sitting across a conference table from Jessica and Andrew, Seeing them in person for the first time since the eviction tested my resolve to its limits. Jessica wouldn't meet my eyes. Andrew alternated between fake concern about my mental state and barely concealed contempt. Their lawyer, an aggressive young man with an expensive suit and ruthless tactics, tried repeatedly to confuse me, to make me contradict myself, to create the impression of cognitive impairment. But I held firm, answering clearly and consistently. Years of reading construction contracts and blueprints had taught me to pay attention to details. When it was Jessica's turn to be questioned by Sophia, cracks began to show in her facade. She contradicted herself several times, particularly regarding when certain documents had supposedly been signed. Her explanations for the money missing from my accounts were vague and inconsistent. By the end of her deposition, even her own lawyer looked concerned. Andrew's deposition the next day went even worse for them. Overconfident and arrogant, he made statements that directly contradicted the evidence we had gathered. When confronted with bank records showing transfers from my account to his personal account, he claimed they were loans I had agreed to. When asked why there was no loan documentation, he became belligerent, accusing Sophia of twisting his words. By the end, he was openly hostile, revealing the true nature that Jessica had apparently fallen under the influence of. Through it all, I maintained a quiet dignity that I hoped would have made Margaret proud. I never raised my voice, never responded to provocations, never showed the anger that sometimes threatened to consume me. I was determined to be the better person, to seek justice rather than revenge. 4 months after my eviction, we received word that the judge had reviewed all evidence and depositions and wanted to meet with both parties. This usually indicated the court was inclined to make a ruling without going to a full trial, which Sophia told me was a positive sign. The courts didn't take such steps unless the evidence was strongly in favor of one side. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a new suit, wanting to project the image of a competent, dignified man rather than a victim. As Sophia and I walked into the courthouse, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened today, I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be discarded and forgotten. That alone was a victory. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and dark wood, designed to intimidate. Jessica and Andrew were already seated with their attorney when Sophia and I entered the courtroom. Jessica looked away quickly, but Andrew stared at me with undisguised hostility. I took a deep breath and focused on the judge's bench, waiting for proceedings to begin. Judge Eleanor Ramirez was in her 60s, with silver hair and piercing dark eyes that seemed to see through pretense. She began by summarizing the case, then looked directly at Jessica and Andrew. "I've reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, and I find the behavior exhibited by the defendants to be among the most disturbing cases of elder exploitation I've seen in my 20 years on the bench," she stated firmly. "The evidence of fraud, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse is overwhelming and incontrovertible." Andrew's face reddened, and he leaned forward as if to speak, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Jessica had gone pale, her eyes fixed on the floor. Judge Ramirez continued, detailing each element of their exploitation: the fraudulent documents, the financial theft, the false medical evaluation, the isolation tactics. With each item, her voice grew more stern, her disapproval more evident. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Ivan Caldwell, on all counts," she declared. "The quitclaim deed is hereby nullified as fraudulent. Full ownership of the property at 58 Oak Lane is restored to Mr. Caldwell immediately. The defendants are ordered to provide a full accounting of all assets removed from the property and all funds taken from Mr. Caldwell's accounts, with restitution to be paid in full within 30 days. She paused, looking directly at Jessica and Andrew. The court would be within its rights to refer this matter for criminal prosecution on charges of fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation. However, Mr. Caldwell has expressed a preference for civil resolution only. The defendants should consider themselves extremely fortunate." Jessica began to cry quietly. Andrew sat rigid, his jaw clenched tightly. Their attorney looked resigned, having clearly anticipated this outcome given the weight of evidence against his clients. Additionally, the judge continued, the defendants will pay all legal costs associated with this case. A restraining order is granted, prohibiting the defendants from coming within 500 feet of Mr. Sane, Caldwell, or contacting him by any means. This order will remain in effect for 5 years, at which time Mr. Caldwell may request renewal if he so chooses. With a final stern look at Jessica and Andrew, Judge Ramirez concluded the hearing. As we rose to leave, I caught a final glimpse of my daughter. Despite everything, a part of me ached at the sight of her distress. She was still my child, even if she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But whatever relationship we might rebuild in the future, if any, would have to be on entirely new terms, with accountability and genuine remorse as its foundation. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright sunshine, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Justice had been served. My home was legally mine again. But I realized something unexpected. I didn't want it anymore. The house held too many painful memories now, overshadowing the happy ones I'd once cherished. When I shared this thought with Sophia, she nodded understandingly. Many of my clients feel the same way after going through something like this. The home becomes tainted by the betrayal. What will you do? I'll sell it, I decided. Properly, legally, on my own terms. But first, I'll go through it carefully and reclaim the personal items that matter most to me. The photographs, the keepsakes, the things that cannot be replaced. The rest is just stuff. In the days that followed, I did exactly that. With Ray accompanying me as a witness, I went through my former home room by room. Many things were already gone, sold or taken by Jessica and Andrew. But in the attic, overlooked in their haste, I found boxes of family photographs, Jessica's school projects I had saved, and the small wooden box containing locks of her baby hair. In the basement, pushed behind the furnace, was the chest containing Margaret's wedding dress, somehow spared from their purge. Each item I reclaimed felt like recovering a piece of my true history, my authentic past that Jessica and Andrew had tried to erase. I took only what had genuine sentimental value, leaving furniture and appliances and other replaceable items behind. When I locked the door for the final time, I felt no regret, only a sense of closing one chapter and beginning another. I listed the house with a reputable realtor who was delighted to represent such a well-built, well-maintained property. It sold within 2 weeks, for more than I had expected. The proceeds went into my investment accounts, adding to the security the lottery had already provided. 3 days after the house sold, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Jessica, calling from a friend's phone to circumvent the restraining order. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. Andrew and we've separated. I didn't realize how he was manipulating me, making me think." I cut her off gently but firmly. "Jessica, you're violating a restraining order by calling me. That's not a good first step if you're truly sorry." "But the house sold so fast," she continued, ignoring my warning. "We need more time to figure things out. Could you loan us some money just until?" And there it was. Not a genuine apology, not real remorse, but another attempt to use me for financial gain. The pain of this final confirmation was sharp, but clarifying. "No, Jessica," I said quietly. "I won't be giving or loaning you money. What you and Andrew did was calculate and cruel. If someday you want to make amends, it won't start with asking for money. It will start with taking full responsibility and demonstrating changed behavior over time." I hung up before she could respond. She tried calling several more times, but I didn't answer. Eventually, the calls stopped. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that she and Andrew had indeed separated, but reconciled once they realized the financial advantages of staying together. They moved to another state, starting fresh where their reputation hadn't preceded them. As for me, I embraced my unexpected new life with increasing confidence. My new home became truly mine, filled with new furniture I had selected and new memories I was creating. The workshop became my sanctuary, where I spent hours creating furniture and wooden toys. I donated many of these creations to children's hospitals and community centers, finding joy in giving without expectation of return. I made new friends through the woodworking club and community volunteering. I reconnected with old friends who had been pushed away during Jessica and Andrew's campaign of isolation. Frank and Gloria from across the street at my old house became regular dinner guests at my new home. Sarah, Jessica's childhood friend, visited occasionally, though we tacitly avoided discussing Jessica. Perhaps the most meaningful development came 6 months after the court case, when I was approached about starting a support group for victims of elder abuse. My case had received some local media coverage, and others who had experienced similar betrayals reached out. With Sophia's guidance, I helped establish a foundation that provided both emotional support and legal assistance to seniors facing exploitation. The group met weekly in a community center, sharing stories and strategies for recovery. Listening to others who had experienced similar betrayals helped me process my own pain, and being able to offer guidance and hope to those still struggling gave purpose to what I had endured. Life had taken an unexpected turn, but as I approached my 70th birthday, I found myself more at peace than I could have imagined in the aftermath of Jessica's betrayal. The lottery money provided security and comfort, but it was the inner resources I had discovered that brought true contentment, the capacity to start over, the strength to seek justice, the wisdom to know when to hold on and when to let go. In the quiet evenings, sitting on my new porch watching the sunset, I sometimes spoke aloud to Margaret, sharing my thoughts as I had throughout our marriage. I liked to think she would be proud of how I had handled everything. Not perfectly, perhaps, but with dignity and determination. The hardest lesson had been accepting that sometimes family is not defined by blood. True family is defined by love, respect, and loyalty. The people who now filled my life, my new friends, my support group, even Sophia and Ray, who had stood by me through the darkest times, were family in all the ways that truly mattered. I won't pretend the pain of Jessica's betrayal ever completely disappeared. There are still moments when a memory ambushes me, still days when the loss feels fresh. But those moments no longer define me. They are part of my story, but not its conclusion. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have fought back or simply moved on? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find comfort or inspiration in knowing they're not alone in facing family betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, it's never too late to begin again, to find strength in adversity, and to create a life of dignity and purpose. Until next time, this is Ivan, wishing you all the best on your own journey.